And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Club Hawthorne from our Crestwood location here. This is one of our PointsBet Sportsbooks locations. This is Emily, our fourth week of Club Hawthorne Live. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Passes by so quickly.
It really does. Yeah, I had to go through location.
Right.
I had to be like, we started at Villa Park, and then we went to Joliet. We've been here for 2 more. Yeah.
Yeah, 4 weeks. So it's one of those things where things really do pass by quickly, and that's going to happen again today. We're covering 6 races today on Club Hawthorne Live. The concept is it's real live wagering strategies and kind of following through for how you take a look at a race. And then in between, we preview one of the big Saturday races as well. So in a little bit, we'll preview the Risen Star from the Fairgrounds, which is a really good race. First of the 50-point Derby preps. But I'll tell you, it's going to be hot and heavy in kind of 2 separate sections because Aqueduct, Gulfstream, Tampa all together, and they kind of put 3 races on top of one another, then do it again. So we may jump around a little bit.
Yeah, we probably should. I think our first race is Gulfstream Park,
Yep.
which is showing 8 minutes to post. So we'll kind of talk about Gulfstream a little bit, look at Tampa a little bit, look at that first race at Aqueduct, and kind of cycle back to Gulfstream, which again, I think this is good practice too, because it reminds people like when you're playing in real time, you kind of have to be sort of jumping around, looking at the board, following these horses. So getting right into it, the third race at Gulfstream Park, we do have a pretty big favorite to start off in the number 2. Of course, that could be the controlling speed in this race and getting some class relief. I kind of felt like it's probably the right horse in the right spot, but it's one of those conditions that it's hard to take a short price on these type of horses. I don't know, did you seem to have a clever idea?
Well, it's interesting, and like you mentioned, we talked about it for each of the first 4 weeks is how you attack races, and like you mentioned time and again, Emily, it's a place to start with the favorite and determine, okay, is this that favorite that makes sense, or is this the favorite that you want to try to beat? Like you mentioned, you look at the board right now, you see 9-5 on the 2, maybe Lucky and Wild. Of course, that definitely figures in the spot. And like you said, it's kind of a controlling speed type of horse in a race that when you hit it makes it tough to try to defeat a horse like that. And that's one of the things that I kind of looked at in this spot. Maybe 9-5 isn't too bad of a price then when you feel like this. What did the grid show for you and kind of the race complexion for the race?
Yeah, it looks like there's some horses that honor near the lead with the number 5 Muguruza, as well as number 4 can even show a little bit of speed. And same thing with the 6, but I don't know if they're quite as fast as the 2, so the 2 just might have that advantage. But when you do start looking from a betting standpoint, you're like, okay, well, 2 has the edge. Then you look at the board and you're like, well, the 3 is 2-1.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if there's much value there, but that horse is going to have to come from off the pace. So people kind of thinking maybe trying to book in that group. But again, you're taking a short price and a horse from off the pace, which that always has some liabilities attached.
Right.
And the 5 chasing. So maybe there's some of these horses that get lost on the board. You kind of start to look at, can you make a case for the 6? Can you make a case for the 7? Another kind of closing type runner in this field. And then as far as the 6 has races that are competitive, but coming off the layoff is not typically where this horse tends to run one of their better races, and would seem like a horse that just kind of needs their better race in order to compete in here. I had a hard time getting creative in this type of spot.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the horses on the track right now at Gulfstream as they go through the post-parade, and I'm with you, and sometimes you kind of get to that point where, hey, you just kind of have to settle for the favorite, and if that's the case, that's fine, and then you try to determine how you want to work things around. So if you do like the 2, maybe Lucky and Wild, then maybe you're looking at multi-race wagers, and it's one of the things where here at Gulfstream, it may not make a huge difference because you kind of have your early pick 3s and your pick 4s. But if we look at a card like Aqueduct today, where you have this massive pick 5 carryover of $285,000, then you want to try to find those singles in there for that sequence. So you kind of have to determine how you want to play races. When you do have a favorite that you do figure is going to be pretty solid in this spot. But I'm kind of with you here, Emily. You look through the field. It's a shorter field. There's not a ton of value. Maybe you just kind of stick with that horse and say, okay, let's move on. There are 5 minutes to post for that race. Do you want kind of take a look at some of the other
I think that's a good idea, especially if Gulfstream can take a little bit. So it seems like Tampa will go next. Tampa and Aqueduct are pretty close together. The same process at Tampa in race 2. So starting with the 8, who's currently a pretty heavy favorite. And I kind of thought you had to start with the 8 and start with the 5. These are 2 horses that are just that much tougher turf race. Where the stablemate of the 8, Kingstown, the stablemate did do a little bit more running back in that January 27th race, but this is probably the right level for the 8. Not a horse I'm super excited about 3 to 5 on.
Right.
And kind of the same thing, look at the 5, there might be a little bit more value there, or maybe look at some of the horses that are going to come back to this condition and also ran on January 27th, but ended up running in this N3 claiming condition.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's interesting too, because you do have 2 of your top contenders that are coming out of turf events, going back to the main track, and those turf events were a little bit tougher, like you mentioned. So you get that class relief in this spot. For me, if you were going to go to one of the 2 horses coming out of the turf, maybe it is the 5 here, and that's right here. This is a horse they take the blinkers off. It was kind of a weird trip in that last out, but I don't think the horse was really just very comfortable in having any means throughout the course of that race either, but you're getting more value. You're getting 6 compared to 3 to 5.
It was a strangely run race because the top 2 that set the pace just went out and cleared, and those race shapes can always create such a strange dynamic, and then the race kind of started to fall apart late with kind of a first run winner. But I could certainly see the value and even some upside, as you mentioned, as far as the trip on the 5. Where the 8 is kind of like what you see is what you get. We've talked about this before. Being the shorter price, a lot of that could be due to the connections. People feeling like these are reliable connections on the class drop. Now, some of these other horses that are returning are going to come out of a common race on January 27th, as I mentioned. And I thought some of those horses had some trips in there where number 7 is the shorter of those 3 finishing second in that race. There was more of a blank for the minors. I'm sorry, finished 3rd in that race because he had run since. Sorry about that. He had run since that race. But going back to that common race, those horses are pretty even for those underneath spots, and I can even upgrade number 2, Bam Bam Warrior, one that could have rushed up wide into the early pace and is going to come back today with a rider change. And even number 1, Geobane's, it's not a horse when you look at the running line alone is going to jump off the page. That was a subtle trip. They got carried wide into the first turn. And the rider, it's one of those rides where they didn't fully commit, but didn't fully kind of take back and grab. So it's one of those that you could project some upside. And the number 1 is taking some money right now, which I think is pretty interesting. Might be a long shot in this race that's worth kind of.
Yep, so we'll take a look back at that race in a couple minutes here. Let's jump over to Aqueduct real quick. There's 13 minutes to post for the first, but for an important reason why here, Emily. Aqueduct has a huge pick 5 carryover. So for those that want to jump in, that carryover, $285,092. It starts here in race number 1 at Aqueduct. They're in the paddock right now. You have a 2 to 5 favorite in here, and the 2 sounds spooky. So like we talked about for that race at Gulfstream, is this a race where you feel this is a free space with the 2, or do you try to defeat the horse and cash huge?
I just have some question marks on this horse altogether. I mean, could certainly win. In terms of class, it might look like a drop on paper because they've been running for that higher claiming tag, but coming into those state bred races, it's more of a lateral move. Again, it could be one of those that for the connections is taking the extra money. I know people get very excited, first time Lasix, all those types of things, but this horse would still have to improve and kind of feel like maybe we've seen it, pretty much a common horse overall. Now, as far as the class drop, number 1, Disturbed, is taking a big class drop. Going back to the first 3 starts, was running against much tougher, especially that December 1st race. That was a much higher level. And then there could be a subtle trip on January 19th, making that first start back of the form cycle. So just the fact that this horse has been running against much tougher, you kind of have to keep that in mind with those running lines, because this horse has never run against this level of competition. And speed figure-wise is right in the mix with these horses. So that was a horse that I found a little bit interesting in this race as an alternative.
Yeah, take into account that track is listed as muddy. It's probably more on the sloppy end of things, but you want to take a look at that if you're kind of diving into some of these horses. The 3 Storm Andy that raced 2 back in the slop, that was one of the better races for this horse's career, and it's taking a little bit of action sitting there at 6 to 1 on the board. So definitely a horse worth looking to as well. We'll jump back to that race in a little bit here, but let's head back to Gulfstream Park. They are listed at 0 minutes to post for the third at Gulfstream. Again, these are 62.50 claimers, now winners of 3 races lifetime. They go 3/4 of a mile, and right now in this spot, Emily, the 2 maybe Lucky Wild is still kind of holding it that favorite at 8-5. Hasn't taken a ton of action, but a little bit of action in this spot. For me, if I'm revolving wagers around some horses, I think I would probably try to beat it with one of the outside 2 horses. But for you, just kind of looking at a betting aspect, what route would you go to?
You know, it's really tough because even with the 6 and the 7, they do offer value, or offer a bigger number compared to the 2. But then you also have to assess, like, are they value in their own right? Like, there are horses that are listed at 6 and 7 on the board, but are they horses that maybe should be 10 or 8-1? You know, so you still have to assess value in that sense. So I found this race tricky. It could be a race, as you mentioned, where you start looking at those multi-race. You know, is there some value if you do, kind of think, okay, I can't really get too creative. Maybe I'm going to stick with a 2, but maybe I'm going to get creative in that second leg into race form, playing some doubles, and that's probably where I'm going to look. Which I feel like it is risky because I'm not super confident on the 2, so I'm going to have to find some overlays looking in that double sequence. But I thought there were some prices in there. Keying off a common race, using the 8, the 10, and the 3. So some prices that may be on horses that don't necessarily jump off the page that seem like they're overlays looking at the doubles.
Yep, so we'll have some options there for race number 3 at Gulfstream. They're walking into the gate right now, so we'll take a look here at the races. They do head into the gate for the third. Again, you do have a 9-5 favorite, 8-5, excuse me, now on the 2. Just dropped the 3-2 on the board for maybe Lucky and Wild there. If you do happen to see us glancing up to the right, we just have the race on the TV screen right over our shoulders there, over the shoulder of Dakota there, as things are going on. So just jumping around a little bit for tracks. Right after that, though, we'll head over to Tampa Bay Downs as they're on the racetrack there for race number 2. Then we'll go over to Aqueduct, but they are walking into the gate for the third. If you're hearing our commentary over the course of that race there, you will see just kind of that. We're not going to have the call of the race. You'll get the commentary of what we see a little bit more in this spot as well. Emily.
All right, looks like they're in the gate. And again, you gotta apologize for kind of looking up, watching the TVs here. See where we're waiting on.
I'm just curious to see if this 2 does kind of jump out of there and grab the quick early lead as well.
We've got a couple horses that stumbled out of the gate with the 5, the 4, and the 3 breaking slow. The 2 even broke a little bit slow, but they're going to rush with the lead. The 6 is the horse that we mentioned that had some tactical speed, got out in front, I think, by default with those other horses breaking slow. But the 2 asserted themselves going forward, on the rail with the 6 stalking. We'll see what that first quarter kind of took out of this horse.
Just that step sometimes rush.
And having to rush up. The 5's kind of making that early move after a stumble to kind of get themselves into the race there. The 3's being pushed along inside. The 4's been able to kind of sit that comfortable trip, just kind of fell into position. The 6 is still pressing the 2 along the rail, and the 7 that outside stalking trip. Again, the 3 and the 7 being those closing types with those other tracking type horses. They're going to turn into the stretch now where the 6 is still stalking the 2 as they turn for home. We'll see if the class is just going to prevail. The 2's starting to find some separation here. You've got the 3 running along on the inside and the 4 on the outside. It's going to come down to that tight finish. We'll see if the 2 ends up holding. Might just be able to hang on as they come down the wire. 2, 4, 3, 6 under the wire.
Like you mentioned, sometimes just the best horse, it goes out there regardless. They got to where they wanted to be. It was a step slow in there, so maybe even the horse ran a little bit better race than what you might have even seen on the screen, just because they kind of had to rush up into the mix early on. But when you're on the best horse, that's the best way to avoid any type of trouble. Just get out of traffic, get away in good order. A good effort out of the 4, but again, like you mentioned, sometimes the favorite is just the best horse, and then you work other wagers around it. You said you'd probably go over to the next race at Gulfstream and find some horses there to work doubles in. So that is the way to play the race. I think you played it very well there, and it comes out with a winner in that spot.
Well, we're only halfway there.
Hey, that's okay. But it's the right play. It's the right start for just kind of using your money valuably at the right level as well. All right, let's head over to Tampa here, Emily. These horses on the track for race number 2. They go 1 mile into 16th in this spot. Looking at the board right now, the favorite is on the outside. That's Kingstown. You mentioned someone who talked about this in prior weeks. sometimes connections take money, and that's where you get here. Antonio Gallardo, Kathleen O'Connell, these are connections that perennially are the leaders in Tampa Bay Downs. It's the reason why they take a lot of action at times too, and possibly the reason why at times you can find some value on some other horses in here. And this is the type of race that you can. We've seen horses, we've seen actually some of these on the show race before, but you go to the mile 16th, it's an 8-9-2. Some have been at this level, some come off the turf. But looking at the board right now, kind of what are your observations for how you'd formulate a plan here for the second at Tampa?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can start probably a horse that fit class drop, and they're putting the horse where it belongs. But again, could just be a little bit short. Again, taking that extra connections money. We mentioned the 5 coming out of that same common race, and then some of those other long shots. I thought this race was tough. I really didn't have much interest in. Let's see where we're at. The 7, being the current second choice at 2-1. Doesn't seem like there's much value on that horse. So I think we could probably find some value with the other horses that were coming out of that common race on January 27th, the 1 and the 2. And so if you felt maybe the 8 is kind of the right horse to try to hook up with some of those prices, and then some of the best bets in racing is a good win bet. So seeing some overlays on those inside horses, that might be the way. I mentioned the 3.
Sure.
There's another horse that they've been trying to run in this, actually entered in that January 27th race, unable to draw in off the also eligible, and then were a bet scratch back on February 3rd, again under similar conditions. But to the credit, they did work since. They worked on February 9th, so that's a positive when you have that bet scratch. So a horse that could certainly fit, as they have run competitive races this season, actually on kind of a forward pattern. So there might be some value on the number 3.
Yeah, there's value on the 3 at 11-1. I think there is a little bit of value there on the 1, if good enough. And they just may not be good enough. But outside draws in the last couple, the 8 hole out of 8 coming off the layoff, and the 9 hole out of 10. The last race, I think, showed a little bit more signs of life.
With that trouble, the trouble that was noted on the first turn.
Yeah, and you're looking at 20-1, so maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. It's something that potentially you could find at least a little bit of a price here. You see they're circling behind the gate there for the second at Tampa. They're 4 minutes to post for the first at Aqueduct, so we'll see. We're trying to get that feed up as well. Again, they have a pick 5 carryover, $285,092. And it is listed right now as a money track over there at Aqueduct. But Tampa, usually they don't take super long for these route races and the dirt when you get to the turf races. Those are the ones that have a shoot. So much heavy money on the outside there.
Yeah. And again, it's a lot like the race 3 at Gulfstream Park, where the class prevailed. That horse taking the class just kind of stood out of the field and then had that class edge, which they needed late, because if they didn't have it, the 4 would have been able to just kind of suck up. So that is the advantage with the 8, having that class advantage coming into pretty short price. I would say if anything, the underlay to me seems like the 7, one I'd probably try to avoid overall.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of surprised that they're not going, that they're like, I don't know why they're waiting for
and especially with what's going on at Aqueduct, because everybody's focused on it. I don't have over $1 million.
Right.
That's if you're Tampa, you want to kind of separate yourself.
I would think so. We're sitting up post time. Looks like they're putting the pedal to the metal with the horse. They're still kind of warming up the Aqueduct. Aqueduct might drag them a little bit, especially. Yeah, right. They're still 2 minutes out. What did you think about the favorite at Aqueduct at number 2?
I was with you. I thought it was vulnerable. I thought there were chances to defeat it. Because here's the thing. I mean, decent races in the last years, and the horse saw some progression, but now you're coming out of a state-bred race and doing an open race. You're adding Lasix today. There's so many different things that kind of come in for a horse that's a very short price. The 3 Storm Andy was the one that I actually liked in this race. I thought you provided a little bit more value. They're currently sitting at 4-1 on the board. The horse has a little bit of tactical speed, ran its best race in the slot in that start 2 back, I felt. And if you're looking for a price, I think 4-1 is one that provides a little bit more value. So I would probably try to beat the favorite in here and at least one line to say, hey, let's see if we can catch something a little bit later on in the sequence. You get that shorter field, but it's one of those races. So
yeah, especially when it's on a carryover. day and not mandatory, because it's much different when you approach, because there is that kind of like you're getting the equity with the carryover pool versus on like a regular day might be a horse that you're like, I'm going to take a stand against. If it's not my day, it's not my day, and you just kind of move on. So you want to be thinking about those things, because the two will come close. But again, if you have some clever ideas later on in the sequence, maybe not necessarily one that you want to like fully stand against. Even if you have some other ideas, you can kind of leverage your ticket. They're in the gate at Tampa. Looks like the 2 was acting up just for a second there, the 1 being a little bit restless. But they all seem to get out fairly well. Maybe the 8 off a step slow, which isn't so great for the favorite. As they kind of have to take that, and we're going to have to work a trip in this race. As far as the pace, I mean, the pace didn't look overly contentious, but we'll see how these horses kind of shake out in the first turn.
I don't mind the position of the 1 here at a price, though.
Yeah, saving ground inside maybe, under a hold, but it's much closer than they've had this horse in the past. The 2 was also sitting a good covered up trip, tracking behind the 6 and the 4, setting the pace, and the 5 stop and trip. The 8's going to move wide for position, which keeping the horse in the clear, probably not a bad idea, but having to move up and wide, 2 horses at this level can be a little bit tough. They're starting to bunch up on the backstretch. And
we'll see if this 1 pushes through,
Yeah, it looks like the 6 is starting to maybe lose some ground. It's hard to tell because the rider's being pretty passive there.
Yeah, 24 and 48.
The 4 looks like they're starting to kind of give it up a little bit, move on the outside. The 5 themselves to take the lead. The 8's in that stalk and trip. Not sure the 1 has enough.
It doesn't look like he's got anything left.
Looks like 2 class droppers are going to be kind of in that battle for 1-2. Now the 3's kind of wide, maybe starting to make a move, and 1 to get underneath spot. But coming into the stretch, you've got the 5 stalked by the 8. The 7's chasing those 2 under a drive. The 5's got that advantage there, remembering that the 8 had to go wide throughout in that first turn. The separation, again, that 3 that I said made that wide move is going to 2 trying to fight back, but it looks like the 5 is going to be able to go clear. Again, we saw in these first 2 races how much that class edge prevailed. And the 8 ran a good race. I mean, missing the break and going wide did that horse no favors, all things considered. But kind of some right ideas, understanding class in those races, and some good rides.
And a much better value there on that.
Absolutely.
Horse class. You mentioned there's 2 horses that had the class edge in that race, the 5 and the 8. The 5 was the better value of the 2. It definitely proved it in the end. There was a pretty big effort there. I think it was somewhere around 6-1.
Yes.
So not too bad by any means there. We'll get back to that result in a second, but they are approaching the gate at Aqueduct here for the opener. Again, they're going a mile here in the first at Aqueduct, Emily. These are $20,000 maidens in this spot. It's a field of 6 with a 4-5 favorite. I'm kind of peeking up there just to see if they do show an update of what they're going to have for that pick 5. But again, the carryover, $285,092 from the 6-horse field. They got to be. You should.
You can kind of see it on that one.
Okay.
A little bit further out.
You'd have to figure. I mean, that's a track that's going to take a lot of action anyway. So if you have $285,000, and again, I kind of like the fact that this carryover is earlier on in the card, so more people can focus on that carryover early. When you get those tracks jumping in as well, and things kind of get muddied a little bit. So I love the early pick 5. It's something that we offer at Hawthorne. It's something that we offer with a carryover as well. And every once in a while you see those carryovers. It's a great way to start the day because a lot of people play the double. They'll play the pick 3. They'll jump it on to pick 4 in race number 2. So to have that pick 5 out there is a really nice option. But as they're getting ready to walk into the gate, I think my money would probably be on the 3 Storm Andy. For you, kind of how would you see things unfolding if you were to play this race?
I took a little clever approach with the 1, just in terms of this horse finding that class relief, and if this horse is going to show run, this would be the time and place. Looks like there could be some contention in this race. It's hard to tell. We haven't seen a race yet to see how the track plays, and I'm always one of those people that I want to see how a track plays and just kind of assume, it's sealed, it's going to play to speed. I think sometimes they're going to react and maybe go out there, and maybe that does kind of set up for the 1, but we'll see how the track plays and that use that information moving forward.
That's one thing for everybody who wants to tune in. You can always watch Wager on the app, wager.hawthorneracecourse.com or the Club Hawthorne app. You can wager on those races. You can see them live right there after you place those wagers. So it's one of the cool things about the app is you're able to see everything in real time as they are walking into the gate here again. This is Club Hawthorne Live. We're located at our Crestwood location today. We're going to Oakbrook for a couple of weeks after this, starting next week and the following week as well, but you do see them all walking in for the first at Aqueduct, and it's one of those things there. After this, we're going to talk about the Risen Star, then we're going to have races kind of jump on top of each other once again, so we may pop around for the tracks a little bit again too, but we want to get as much information out as possible.
I thought we did good. Good information bouncing around, so we'll keep up that rhythm, and it should be good. They're off at Aqueduct. Looks like the one got off a step slow, and we're kind of seeing the 2 and the 5 push forward, pushing that pace, starting to bunch up a little bit. One down inside. The 2, they're going to take hold a little bit and try to rate off that pace-setting pair with the 6 softened wide. The 5 and the 3 are going out to push the pace, and then the 4s keeping wide off the inside, outside of those horses. We'll see what the fractions are. They're going 24 for that opening quarter. The 2's getting a great trip for a horse that's a favorite. I mean, if you're kind of riding on that horse right now, can't fault that position. As there's minimal change to the running order, 5 dueling inside the 3. The 2 is stalking. The 1 is able to make up a little bit of ground to move inside, and the 6 is still stalking wide with the 4 off the pace.
Yeah, the biggest question is seeing if the leaders run out, and you don't know because the start of a day on a wet track.
Yeah, it looks like the 2's in a great spot. Should be able to kind of get the trip there. The 5 started to back up as the first to quit, as the 3 ended up taking the lead. This is a horse you were helping.
I was into this horse, yeah. And again, it was just kind of the move to the off track. I think was going to be beneficial, although the horse is drifting out. A little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if it's like a function of the rider maybe trying to intimidate the 2 as they come into the stretch and have some stamina here. That's really what it's going to come down to in this final quarter. Yeah, it looks like the 2 is going to have first run, but absolutely, they're trying on there. You might find some grit, finding some grit there. It's going to be a stretch battle.
All right, so this is going to come down to a top. It's probably the 2.
Yeah.
Probably the 2. I was surprised the 3 fought back. It looked like he was out of gas in the first 16 pole.
Yeah, I think the rider. I can't quit now. The trainer's probably like, we're playing this character, so you better ride this horse.
So here's a cool thing. So we're sitting here at an OTB. We're watching races. When you have interest on races, you're kind of seeing our reaction on the screen too if we're not able to show the signal of the race at the time. So sometimes you see the lean, sometimes you kind of see what they're doing for the drift, how they're handling everything for a rider sticking with a horse. Something about watching races and wagering. They can kind of jump into the pool party because we're going to watch and wager on a lot of races for Rebel Weekend, which is taking place in Oakland. But that's taking place next Saturday, Emily. They're giving us a grand bet, so no pressure on us by any means. But this should be a whole lot of fun too.
It's just a regular Saturday, and I mean the Rebel card. These big days, they stack them up. Should be a good race. We've had lots of practice with our derby prep, so we should be ready for that. And I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Getting out there and you and I betting together, which is going to be fun, especially for having kind of a few weeks and collaborating. So it's going to be a good time, and it's a great location over at Oakbrook.
It is. It's a great location. These are always so much fun whenever we have any of these pool parties. It's $35 to get in. You get food. You get drink. You get a portion of the betting pool. We're going to take some shots to try to make some money, but you're able to do that when you get $1,000 bank. And the one thing that I really like too, Emily, is that Oakland Park draws very early, so we're going to have a lot of lead time going into that card. So a lot of time to do our research to kind of take a look at everything leading into that pool party, and it should be a whole lot of fun. Now, before we jump into our next set of races, it was the 2 that did get up in time there at Aqueduct over the 3. It went 2:65. Let's head over and take a look at our Saturday feature. The Saturday feature is the 50-point races for the Derby preps. This is the Risen Star at Fairgrounds. They go 1.1 miles in here. It's a full field of 14 in the spot, Emily. A relatively evenly matched bunch. Big formation, your 3-1 favorite here. This one's stuck near the outside too with a horse that has speed. But what do you make here of the Risen Star? Were there any horses that jumped off the paper or at least intriguing to you in here? Because I'm looking at your plot. There's stuff all over the place. What happens when you get 14?
Well, the first thing that you mentioned, I really want to key off that, is when you say, and I think a lot of people are kind of saying this, right? They're saying it's an evenly matched group or it's a competitive field. And just keep that in your mind when you're really thinking in terms of betting, right? Because when it is, you start saying it's a competitive group, it's an evenly matched group. A horse like the 13 that could end up being the favorite, maybe you like that horse the best, but if you have in your mind it's a competitive group, they're evenly matched, maybe that horse ends up being a short price, and you want to find value on some of those horses because it's evenly matched and it's competitive. So starting the analysis with the morning line favorite, a horse like Victory Formation, who at this point has done everything that's asked of them, but they're going to be class tested today. You know, the post could be a factor. They are going to have to use from the outside. Now, having tactical speed, that run in the first turn, finishing ability, confidence, strong connections on their side, could be able to overcome that. I don't necessarily see that as like a vulnerability, but it is a hurdle, right? Especially when you're talking about a short price, you're talking about a step up in class. I think a lot of attention, kind of wise guy attention, seems to go towards the stablemate number 8, Tappett's Conquest, of course, that maybe has a little bit more tactical speed, and people kind of seeing that type of trip where they're going to be able to stock off Victory Formation and get first run. So, for both those horses, I think both those horses are certainly capable. I'm taking more of that approach where I'm going to kind of see the board. There's a couple horses in here that at a bit of a price that I'm keeping on the radar, horses that I've liked, starting with number 7, Sun Thunder, going into the Southwest. Felt like it was maybe a subtle prep because they were coming off a maiden win, just kind of resetting that form cycle. The fact that they show up here seems kind of like a hidden third start off the layoff where a horse can be sitting on their peak effort with Brian Hernandez back aboard. And then kind of keying off the Aqueduct connections, number 12, Crumpy, is still a maiden, but this is a horse that's developing, has a lot of stamina, has been able to improve. That is one I'm going to keep on the radar. I know there was a few you were interested in as well.
Well, and it's interesting, and you make a good point, because there's usually a couple of terms that I'll use. I'll use wide open race, or I'll use there's a standout in this race, and it's kind of trying to lead you to the fact that if I personally feel a favorite is the one to sit on. If I say it's a wide open field, I do want to look at some prices as well. And it's interesting because in the age of the Derby point system now, preps are handled differently. When it used to be earnings going into the Derby, you can say, okay, I maybe need to win one race, but it's not required because you want to get ready for the first Saturday in May. In the age of the point system, you have to either try to win one of the races or win second, one of the 100 pointers. So it probably has changed the way trainers maybe approach things for the prep season as well, because you come out of here, now if you win this race, you're in the Derby. You're going to have enough points to get in, so maybe you kind of change your patterns coming out of here. I wanted to look at, we talked about the Rebelli horse, 2 fills, a few weeks ago, and this was one that Larry said going into that race, the horse was training like a monster and ran a good race in low count. That was at odds of 4-1, finished second in there. I checked in with Larry again this morning, and here's what Larry said. He said distance is his only concern this time. So that's the thing. If we're going into the count, it was ultra confident. Ultra, yes, this is a horse I'm really happy in that. He said nothing has changed at all with the training of the racehorse, but he said distance is going to be the one thing that starts to become a question mark. But he said that's a question for me, and he said that's a question he thinks for a lot of others in the race too. I did ask him what he thought they were going to do tactically in this spot, and he said they probably wanted to sit a little bit closer here. They didn't think there was a ton of speed in this race, so he's thinking maybe 2-3 lengths off the pace, and then just find out where they are stamina-wise in the end. But value-wise, maybe you look at the 2 fills in there and see. But if the horse is bet down to 92, I don't know if that's value for me. He
could get overlooked.
And I hope he does.
Yeah, and I think that is the type of horse, especially with what you just mentioned, that you do kind of require some value, because not only does he have that stamina test, but he's going to also have to improve. He's going to have to step forward in the second start of the form cycle. But again, that's a question for all these horses. A lot of these horses are going to have to take that step.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that. The other one that I think is interesting is the 5. That's Harlow Cap. This is a horse that's coming from the Baffert barn. You're going to start to see a lot of Baffert movement because the Bob Baffert trained horses are not eligible for Derby points. They have to make the determination before the end of February who's going to train these horses if they want to be allowed to get points going into the Derby. Now, You saw in the past a lot of the Bafferts went over to an ex-assistant, Tim Yaktine, and just stayed in California and then went that route. This was interesting, I thought. This move over to Steve Asmussen. So you're coming from the West Coast, you're going east, you're going to Steve Asmussen, who we know is a Hall of Fame trainer, very accomplished. Did that move surprise you at all, just coming out there and instead of saying we're going to be one of those that remains in California, or is it because Baffert's just got so many horses in California that somebody kind of has to go maybe a different direction?
You know, there's a lot of those questions that you just can't have the answer to, and you kind of play what ifs. As far as Harlow Cap, he's been working in California, so it's not quite the barn change yet. It's the barn change in name only, and as you mentioned, it's for the points. So he hasn't really had a chance to kind of get into the Steve Asmussen kind of program, right? So I'm assessing this horse as an individual off kind of what he's shown so far, despite maybe there is that intent, maybe there is a step forward, because he's going to have to show a big step forward. There has been some subtle progression race to race, but with Baffert horses, they're usually pretty quick early. You kind of see what you're going to get out of them, and I kind of feel like this horse, he's going to really have to improve. He's going to have to improve. He's stepping up to take on winners for the first time, and it's a tough task. Now, we go back to that beginning statement of it's a competitive field. There's a way to go. At the right number, you can start saying, you can start messing around, kind of with those what ifs, because there should be value in this field somewhere, right? Somebody ends up getting overlooked, or somebody ends up going off a little bit short. You start getting some overlays and start looking and kind of making cases for those horses, because like Ravelli said, there's a lot of question marks as far as distance and as far as these horses having to improve. And I think we should mention number 9, Curly Jack, just as a horse to mention, because he's coming out of that Kentucky JC race, a race that has been that productive race. We've seen horses improve, and this is certainly a horse that has to improve. He's coming off the layoff to make that first start of the season. Could have a class edge because he's been running in those graded stakes races. So, we'll sort of just kind of have to see as far as him, but could be some intent as well for local connections.
And I'm curious, because like you mentioned, it's local connections, so he's stable. The trainer's always there. He knows the racetrack. This horse has been training over the racetrack. I think you're going to get more than the 8-1 morning line on that horse too. So maybe it provides a little bit of value there, and value is going to be the key in a race like this when you do have that full field of 14. So something that we'll definitely keep an eye on with the Risen Star that goes as race number 13 tomorrow at the fairgrounds. So going back here to our races up next one is for the Gulfstream parties. They're $20,000 claimers. They're on the turf course here. You get a field of 10 to line up. The 5 is your favorite right now. That's Jack McCad, Irad Ortiz for trainer George Weaver. This is a horse that raced for 16 in that last out. What scares me with heavy favorites is when the running style is having to come from a little bit out of it. Because so many things can happen to go wrong to really compromise you. This is a favorite that I would definitely try to beat in the spot. How did you approach it?
But no, I agree. I agree completely, especially at the sharp price of a closer. Now, this track profile, the rails are out at 14 feet, and watching kind of the results and the way that this track is played with those rails out at 14 feet the last couple days, it has kind of favored horses that are stalkers, horses that have the early speed, have struggled a little bit. So I think coming from off the pace is okay, but being a deep closer in a 10-horse field, they're going to really have to work a trip. Plus, they're also giving up some recency coming back off that 48-day break. And just kind of overall, really doesn't have much of an edge to justify that short price. And again, offering some value in this race where there's some, I know I mentioned a few earlier, but where you and your
I'm looking at the screen right now. The 10 Bourbon Thunder is really intriguing to me. I mean, this is a barn that is incredible off the claim. They're almost at 25% of the claim. They don't start a ton of horses either. So the horses that they do have to be placed well, have to run well. I didn't think the horse ran poorly last time. It was just kind of a so-so race, but the horse was hung wide, but took action. It was bet down to 7-2 in that spot there. I don't mind the outside draw. Like you mentioned, the rails are out a little bit. You have to have kind of that closer stalking type of trip, and I think this horse could be positioned nicely. We're looking at 6-1 on the board right now. I'd rather take that than the 7-5 anything.
That's one of the ones I have going in the doubles, and for those reasons. And then you mentioned the barn. The barn's actually been pretty live as of late, and pretty live as of late with Sunny Leon aboard.
Right.
So I kind of started to look more at recency and the rider change, especially with intent, because this horse is going first off the claim. So that's definitely one I use. A couple others I wanted in a number, but the difference is 20. But going 2 back when the horse ran at this restricted condition, put in a good closing run, doesn't have to be necessarily that far back. They have been able to run and race closer to the pace. Now, granted, it was against a little bit softer, but just at the price, I just threw that one in. Same thing with the number 3 is had an excuse last out, coming out of the same common race as Bourbon Thunder, and had a little bit of a trip. Those horses finishing in a blanket for the Miners, another horse that was just kind of in the mix at the price.
And here's the thing, I always know it's what I think is going to be a running style for horses. The 3 I put a question mark because I didn't know. I mean, maybe you're going to see some speed. Maybe you're going to see some stalking trip. Last time out, the horse sits back and then tries to run on late, but the horse followed at the start too. So you just don't know what their plan is going to be. But that's the difference. When you have these horses that may come out of it, and they're going to come from out of it at 25-1. That's a whole different story than they're going to come out of it at 7-5. So I like your thought process here with the 8. I think all the races, even prior to that last one, were all competitive and put the horse right in the mix. And all 5 lifetime victories have come over the grass. So I could see using that horse. If I'm going to play the race, I think I would probably take their 2 long shots. I'd take the 3 and the 8. I'd probably hook it up with the 10. Maybe box those and see if you can get 2 out of the 3 to run 1-2 and get a nice big score. I think that's one of the opportunities that you get here. But that's one of the things that's interesting too, Emily, and you make a very astute note on looking at where the rail is on the turf course, because that can change how a course plays.
Yeah,
you get the rail all the way and you get it way out. Arlington Park used to bring it so far out that you'd have 2 different courses, but it does. It changes the whole kind of complexion of the race, how the track sets up, how the surface sets up, and how a race can have an outcome as well.
Yeah, and Gulfstream can do the same thing. You can start finding those patterns. A couple of horses in here that are kind of maybe even getting a little bit overlooked is the 4 right now, Cash Call Kitten, making a second start of the layoff and actually coming out of even though it's coming up at open 10,000, it was a higher race par event. And then the same thing with the 9 Drill-O-Matic, 3rd start of the layoff. It's also another horse that's the class changes in play, but a lower race par today, and a horse that's kind of on the improve in the 3rd start of the layoff. So I think overall what we're saying is there's alternatives to the 5 at 8-5, and as a big favorite, especially with the running style and that short price, and kind of going back to what we mentioned with the Risen Star.
Yep.
It's a competitive race, it's a full field, so take me short price, maybe not necessarily the quote unquote best bet.
And here's the cool thing about it, though. You played this right going into the race, because race 3, you took a stance on a horse and then were able to spread with multiple horses in this spot. So it gives you the chance to cheer for a little bit of value. You should make note, rain is pouring down Aqueduct, so the track is going to shift if it hasn't as of yet. We're on the track to the 3rd at Tampa Bay down, so we'll get back to that next. But let's go back to Gulfstream Park as they are loading into the gate here for the 4th. Again, these are $20,000 flavors. They go the mile. It's not a real long run into the first turn either, so riders are going to have to work out their position early on. Emily and I are both on board with trying to defeat the favorite here, the 5 at 9-5 Jack the Cat. If that horse beats us, hey, it beats us. There's so much other value in this race. So, Emily, if we hear you cheering for one of any 3 or 4 horses running down the lane, that's okay, because it means you're live with some value in here, and that's what we want out of a race like this.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. They're waiting for one more as we go in the gate. Yeah, that rain is really coming down.
Crazy, isn't it? That track will be sloppy. That probably by the second, right? So,
all right, and then they're off at Gulfstream Park. The 6, the 8, and the 9 all broke a little bit slow. They're going forward with the 7. The 10's going to get that stalking trip, kind of right outside where he projected. The 2 sitting down in the pocket. The 5 with cover. They're going to take hold on the 4, moving that horse to the outside. Where the 6 is wide. The 7's able to save ground. The 9 covering to get some cover, while the 8 is going to race off the pace.
I like the position of the 10 though here.
Yeah, staying uncovered and staying up close. The 7 pushing the pace. 7 on the rail getting pressed with the 2 pushing the pace. The 5's now able to kind of move and save some ground covered up inside. And take kind of a big hold over the 1. We'll see. 6 starting to make an early move on the outside. And the 5, that horse that we thought was going to be more kind of a deeper closer, maybe a tactical position. The right idea, right? Put that horse in the race and giving that horse the best chance to compete. Yeah, not very quick over this course. Slowed it down to that second quarter, almost 25 for the second quarter. 10's going to make that first run after sitting outside. We'll just see if this horse has some finishing ability in live. Me too, because that 5 looks like they're sitting in wait. 8's not going to show much, so kind of the lone battleship in there. 7's going to find a little bit more as the 5 moves to the outside, and it looks like the 5 might be able to run this horse down.
We don't want 5s.
All right, it looks like it's going to be 5, 7, 110 as they cross the wire. Now we'll move on quick because we just don't have a chance to reminisce on that, and that's quite all right. As we move on to race 3. Now this is a race that I considered, should we just pass it? But I thought it was going to be a favorite, and they are a favorite right now. I thought it would be a lot shorter, and the 8's taking some money right now. It's 5 to 2 is the second choice, and then it's a bit of a scramble for those other spots. It's 7 sitting at 4 to 1, 6, 9 to 2, and then double digits on the 2 and the 5. But you had a good case for the 8, or a case against the 1?
I thought I could try to make a case to maybe beat the 1 there at Tampa Bay Downs, our fantasy. The horse was coming in off a little bit of a layoff. It was a really bad effort in that last out, and that was the reason why. The horse was claimed poor effort there, so maybe the transition of the barn wasn't something that the horse handled well, and then they feel that they had to give this horse some time off. But we talked about it time and again. This is a horse that was stabled at Gulfstream Park, training at Gulfstream Park, but you have to ship to Tampa to find that race. So those are the things that scare me a little bit when you see some of these horses shipping over for overnight races, because it means they don't feel they can race at the caliber of racehorse that you're seeing at Gulfstream Park for their championship. Or there's races not even offered at that level, which really seems to be the case. But this horse was claimed for 22 back, and now they're in for 5. There were enough red flags for me to stay away from 1 our fantasy. So I went to the 8 here. This is a horse that, again, though, you don't get a whole lot of value. And the value's hurt a little bit by a couple of scratches. The 8 Charge of Jen was a horse that at least was racing at kind of a more logical level, because they claimed this horse for 5,000, and then they were trying to face some better horses, and they ran actually with some decent company. This was a horse that ran decent against better company. Those races came on the turf, though. You're back to the main track here. So there's some questions about the 8 Charge at Genoa as well. I don't know if we're going to get any value. It looks like they have an inquiry there at Gulfstream Park, so I'm curious to see what the inquiries are. Oh, it's about the 3 horse. 3 12 at the start there. So that was the horse we talked about. So you're hoping for a refund with that. The horse never came out of the gate. So I wonder if they're gonna. Let's see if they're gonna declare that horse a non-starter.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Turnbull's head up beside it.
Yeah, I think maybe the
you're
horse
looking at it now on the screen. Yeah.
Self-inflicted, but
I do too. But you look, because the horse turns its head to the side. You're going to see it in the replay that you're seeing on our feed right now. The starter does lift his hand, though, and that's one of the things that they look for. Did the gate spring at the right time? Did the starter lift his hand? Now, at this point, when multiple people are encouraging the horse to come from out of the gate, that's kind of the end of the day. But the horse was distanced by everybody in that spot, so it's one of the things where, and just kind of chalk that race up to just ugliness for us by any means. But that race did go 5, 7, 110. I was actually hoping the 10 was going to run a little bit better there than finishing 4th. Now, they are starting to walk to the gate at Tampa. We'll get to that in a second. But Emily, let's shift over to Aqueduct real briefly here. 20,000 again, our hours flies through.
It really does.
So quick. Part of the entry, the one Baradia is out at this spot. The one that does remain in, that is Indian Bella. The track is now listed as sloppy at Aqueduct as we expected in this spot. So we'll see kind of how things unfold. But what were your impressions there looking at race number 2 at Aqueduct?
Yeah, I thought that the other part of the entry was the stronger part. Yep. And I think the public kind of feels the same way, because they're currently making the 7th the favorite. But I thought there was a scenario where the pace was going to be a little bit contentious in here. Now, it's tough to say what that's going to do, but it did seem to play fair, in my opinion, in the first race, though things have kind of shifted a little bit since. But if the track does play fair, I think there is a scenario where the 4 could get a
Thank you.
trip
That's
from
who I
off the
had too. I was
pace.
shocked at the price.
Yeah. It's another barn that kind of has some sneaky angles, bringing horses in, running horses on the circuit this time of the year. So there was sort of enough to just kind of maybe get to a price because as far as the 7, I could certainly see that can be upgraded from the most recent start back on February 10th. It takes some kickback that day. As far as the 1, again, I when the 1A was in the race, I felt like the 1A was the stronger part of the entry. The 1 and the 1A were coming out of a common race. And then the 3 wasn't a horse that I cared about, that I gave much of a look to. Is currently, I guess they're kind of co-favorites right now. 3, just one of those other horses that finish and the visuals heavily seen and suggest this horse is going to be able to take another step forward. So not really having that pace advantage, class advantage, or form advantage. That was just going to be a little bit too short of a price. Now the 2 is a horse that has some ability to stalk and pounce. Maybe he's getting a little bit overlooked and maybe offering a little bit of value right now at that current 5-1 in this field.
I'm a Harry Potter fan, so seeing Gringotts for a name of a horse is something that I definitely jumped to, and that's the
I
name
would
of
have
the
never
4
known.
horses.
Is that a Harry Potter reference?
It is.
Okay.
Gringotts Bank, yeah. So that's one of the things that's cool. Here's the thing about the 4. The best races have all come on a wet track. This horse, 6 starts on a wet track, 4, 6 on the board. The lifetime has been on a wet track. So that's the reason I could make a case. And now the horse just jumped from 12 down to 8-1. Let's go over Tampa real quick, as Tampa is going in the gate here again. 7/8 of a mile. It's hard. I would stay away from the 1. The 1 is your there that fantasy. Really, even Georgia Jen was jump on here, but that's a horse field. Reclaimers, I think you probably try to at least defeat that favorite, find somebody here at a little bit of a price. So Charge of Jen was the route I was going to go. The one thing that's really tough at Tampa Bay Downs, their 7/8 of a mile start is behind a tree, so you don't get a great view, at least from the pan shot. You do get a little bit of a view from the head on, but not the pan.
Yeah, I feel like doing trip notes for multiple tracks year round.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like, all right, I know how to look at these races through adversity, through the trees. Fairgrounds giving me my biggest challenge and making me probably the sharpest as far as being able to adjust.
Straight down on the horses there in the stretch.
Or the showing from the gate and then immediately cut away.
Yes.
But let's see, we're going out there to the front with the 5 being pressed by the 6. The 1's kind of moving up to stalk inside, really dropped down in odds late, sitting at 1-2. The 8 stalking wide. I mean, the class drop on the 1 is just so severe, but as far as the way the horse is traveling, isn't that great? The 8 is stalking wide, the 7 even outside that one as the 1 starts to kind of assert themselves through on the inside. It might just be the best horse in this field. Your 8 is given no favors at all, kind of chasing wide throughout. As they turn, but they haven't been going very fast. They're starting to move on the outside. Again, I didn't think the 1 was traveling that well, and the 1 is now starting to lose. As I say that, they hear me and find another gear. As the 5 starts to drop back, we'll see they're kind of all in on this 1. The 6 is stalking.
It's been a dream trip for the 1 though, and they still might not win.
Yeah, struggling to change leads. We'll see as this comes down. Looks like kind of the 8 sort of struggling on the outside, but this could be anybody's race. The 6 is going to poke their nose in front.
They're all plugging away, yeah.
And the 8's going to come back, try to close a little bit, but the 6, I mean, I feel like that's really almost a race function of the 1 losing more than anybody winning. One of those.
Right. The right play there was beat the 1. Because there were the question marks, playing for 22 races later, you're in for 5, you're going from Gulfstream over to Tampa. We're right there. You had to try to beat the 1, like you mentioned. Didn't travel great. It was a dream trip. There's absolutely no excuses for that. So they went through along the inside, saved the ground. The horses that run the wide trip were the 2 horses that run 1-2. All right, Aqueduct's loading into the gate. This is the last race of our hour show here for Club Hawthorne Live. $20,000 claimers. They go the mile in here. The 4 is probably where I would go with my money in this spot, just because of the horse liking the off track and not loving anybody else in this race.
Well, and the name play. I mean, now you've got the name.
There's people that play by names, though. They play by names. They play by number. They play by jocks. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you're going to play Gringotts. So it's one of those things. there, and we'll see if the horse got out just a step slow, but nobody's really sprung out on top here.
Yeah, I mean, the horse is going to come from off the pace, which is, kind of okay in the case. The 2 also off a little bit slow, but we'll see as the 3 gets out in front, getting pushed by the 5, the 1 sitting that soft and trip. The 4 has run. They're kind of behind horses, moving to the outside. Just sort of need like fair fractions at a fair racetrack at this point. The 1 is getting a good trip, sitting right behind that first flight. This 2 is able to save ground. Starting to lose some ground on the 7, even the 6 kind of struggling a little bit, it would appear.
Yeah, 23 and 4 for the opening.
Yeah, so not too quick. The horse has some run. They're wide. Gonna have to be a little bit best in here to kind of work the trip from there today. As they're kind of unchanged up front in those first 3 spots. The 3 is pressed, saving ground inside. 5 sitting right on their hip, and the 1 is stalking. Not the right trip.
No, it was interesting. Decided to go wide and go outside a horse there, and maybe it was they don't want to kick back to the slot. Maybe the horse wasn't fast enough. That could be the case too. But that track's very sloppy.
Yeah, it didn't seem like maybe we'll see a function of the track change throughout the day. The 5 was able to just kind of get that right trip throughout, pressing as the 3 starts to back up. And the 1 was a horse that we just kind of felt was not the better part of the entry, and is trying to grind. Yeah, and again, it's so hard to tell because they were on the pace, maybe getting a little bit tired, but also could be a function of the track. It's tight for second between the 3 and the 1, but clear cut 5 was able to.
I definitely wouldn't be sold on the way the 5 finished in that spot by any means.
I mean, again, I think this was the right trip, the right spot for the 5.
Yes.
That horse had some back class and certainly could make sense from that perspective on the horse. But again, it's so hard to tell. Like, it's a difference, right, between the 1 at Tampa where the 1 just wasn't traveling well, the 5 getting out late and drifting and changing leads. But again, it could be that the horse is sitting up close to the pace, and then the horses too, their defense system is their legs. Right? If they run, have put under them. So if they don't feel comfortable, they're going to do weird stuff in order to start feeling comfortable. So it's hard to tell, but I can definitely see some regression off this effort from the 5.
Yeah, you would run into these days in the past at Aqueduct where you'd be wondering if they're going to finish the card because it's winter weather, it's a sloppy track, it's an ugly, ugly track. A day like today when you have over $1 million bet into a pick 5, you want to get through that sequence because it's just one of the things. There's so much money in the pool, so they're going to be, if they have to barter, if they do have to bargain, whatever, delay to do track maintenance, you're going to see it. But it was one of those things where the 5 got the job done, 5-1-3-7 there. But man, you're going to see it. It was switch leads late in the lane and just drift out a little. But again, nobody was coming great. It was the right trip though for that horse there, Emily. But it closes out another hour. 6 races just blow by.
6 races and a graded stakes analysis. So
but it's fun. But it's cool. And that's the cool thing about it is trying to find ways to handicap races, how you want to attack races, right about how to jump in and try to beat some local favorites. So today, so that's one of the things that's very important as well. Now, if people want to come out and talk to us kind of about how we are going to do things handicapping wise, they can do so at the pool party next Saturday because we're going to go through these sequences. We're going to try to find some value. We're ending with the Rebel at Oakland. It doesn't mean we're necessarily stuck to that track. If we love a horse somewhere else and want to make the folks some money, we're going to do so, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It'll be a lot like this. I mean, the opportunities can often not come in those big stakes races. Sometimes the stakes days end up being pretty chalky and there's not that many opportunities. So, yeah, I'll be looking at the slate of races that are during that period of time and trying to find the best opportunities to make money.
Right. It's going to be a busy weekend for us definitely next week. We're going to be at Oakbrook Terrace for our Club Hawthorne live show next Friday. We're going to be out at Crestwood next Saturday for our pool party. Again, $35 to get in for the pool party. You get program, you get food, you get drinks, you get a part of the $1,000 betting pool. It's going to be fun constructing tickets with you because we see races in different ways at times. Sometimes we see races right on. I think this is going to be a whole lot of fun to bet $1,000 and try to make some money, but we can get creative too. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes down to really structuring bets, maximizing your opinion, and getting lucky in the right spot. And it's a good time. It's a great venue, so if you're in the area, definitely come on out, hang out. There's lots of space, good food, everything that you want, and then more.
It's been a lot of fun today here at our Crestwood location for Club Hawthorne Live. Again, we're going to be at Oakbrook next week on Friday. As always, if you want to see any of Emily's handicapping insight, go to our handicapping page there at hawthornebracecourse.com. Click on the selections page. There's so much analysis, so much information out there. Emily, you covered a lot of different racetracks. Oaklawn's one of your main tracks that you focus on too, right?
Yeah, I take notes there, but I focused on it because it seemed like a lot of the players here local to Hawthorne follow Oaklawn, and so I kind of felt like, keeping kind of with that theme, and then a lot of the horses that have been running at Oaklawn ran at Hawthorne. We've had some Hawthorne runners really kind of pop up at some prices at Oaklawn too, which is always cool to see, especially because they kind of sneak under the public radar, but not mine. Not mine or either, that's for sure.
You're going to catch value there, and you do time and again and again. So definitely check that out as well. All right, that wraps things up for week number 4 of Club Hawthorne Live. For Emily Gullikson, for Nate, for Dakota, I'm Jim Miller. Good luck to everybody this weekend. We'll join you again next week with week number 5 of Club Hawthorne Live. Good luck.
You like this horse, right?
Here's the thing, though. I'll roll with what